Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. This story takes place from 2015 to 2022. I went to school for digital media production. I worked in a production studio on several streaming shows and web series and was so good that I later opened up my own digital content creation business. But the thing you need to know about this industry is that the starting cost can be massive when you begin. You can't do the work unless you have the equipment, so at minimum you need to spend $50K on equipment before even opening your doors. And so during the first couple of years when my company was still in the red and paying off the cost of equipment, I decided I would take on a side job that could provide a consistent, livable income. With my previous experience in digital production and being an expert at several different types of equipment, it was just the edge I needed to get into a position at an upscale luxury hotel in my city. By upscale, I mean it was the luxury hotel, one of the oldest hotels in the Southwest and the fanciest non-chain hotel in the entire state. Think the Bellagio of the Southwest, let's call them Pinnacle Hotel. It was 2015 and I was just starting out as their brand new audio-visual specialist. As an AV specialist, I literally made all events at the hotel happen. A few hours before your event, I would be the one in the ballroom setting up everything. The lights, sound system, projectors, screens, and even some stage elements. I was the difference between your event looking impressive or your event happening in a bare-bones room. If your event called for it, I would also be the one in the back of the room operating the tech table. This is one of the areas my previous experience in the production studio came in handy. I was already used to the high-paced experience of operating a live event, so I was right in my element. After the event, I would then have to strike the room and get it ready for the next event. I was good at my job. Very good. So good, in fact, that within 6 months of being hired, I became their lead specialist, meaning it was my call to make sure every event was set up and ready on time. I managed a team of 3 other techs and made sure every event was ready to go. I can honestly say that I've never missed a deadline on an event, even when turnaround times in a ballroom were measured in minutes rather than hours. I learned in the production industry that when the event starts at a scheduled time, no matter what the show must go on, so I always figured out a way to make it happen. A little background on how the Pinnacle Hotel ran. I had several layers of bosses. Immediately above me, there was the director and the event coordinator. The event coordinator handled the months of planning, contracts, and billing of clients, and the director was the linchpin that connected all the activities of the hotel to all the activities of the AV department. Together, we were just one branch of a larger AV company that we'll call Apex Tech. Apex Tech is a nationwide company that has locations in hundreds of hotels across the country. My branch of Apex Tech worked for Pinnacle Hotel. Along with having the event guests at the hotel as clients, the hotel itself was also considered a client. Apex Tech was under a contract that granted us residency at the hotel. Pinnacle Hotel would throw all AV business our way in return for a percentage of the profit, as well as providing all hotel AV needs for a reduced cost. Hotel events could be as simple as a projector and screen for a weekly staff meeting, or could be as difficult as a huge company event for the parent company. The hotel is owned by a large corporation, we'll call them Global Hospitality Group, or GHG for short, that owns several upscale luxury hotels all over the country. But the home office for GHG was only 3 blocks away from Pinnacle Hotel, so Pinnacle Hotel was the flagship hotel for the entire corporation. The hotel that GHG would hold all its events at. The hotel that was always under the microscope and held to the highest standards. Over the years of working side by side with GHG, I made some pretty big connections. Since I was an AV specialist with a digital content creation company, I was able to negotiate that into a very profitable situation in which I started to handle the corporation's video production work when needed in connection to a hotel event. Whenever they had a presentation to give that required more than a simple PowerPoint, I made the video. So, needless to say, I became very well known among the staff at Pinnacle Hotel and the staff at GHG. I was also well known among the event staff and executives I worked with at the hotel. I had event planners, executives, politicians, and CEOs that remembered my name because I was that guy that made their large events happen. They trusted me. I was sometimes the only outsider present in a room where secret meetings were taking place. And I was even vetted by the Secret Service so that I was the only AV specialist in the city with the security clearance to be in the same room as the president. Those years with Apex Tech were some of the best years of my professional career, and I received constant praise and recognition from clients, the hotel, and GHG. But all things must come to an end, and in 2020, Apex Tech's contract was up. GHG had the choice to either renew the contract or go with a different AV company. Enter Zenith Systems. Over the last year and a half, they've been growing and moving into our territory. It was no secret that a couple of Zenith Systems executives had the ear of some of the GHG executives, so it was no surprise when the decision was made that in order to cut costs, Apex Tech was underbid and Zenith Systems would become the next resident of the hotel. Did I mention this was a national deal? For the last 5 years, Apex Tech had been the AV company at every hotel of GHG nationwide, and now every location was switching to Zenith Systems. When it came to our hotel, the flagship hotel, there was a stipulation entered into the contract. I had to come with the deal. I knew the clients, and the clients knew me. They trusted me. They knew the work I produced was quality, and it would ease the transition considerably. So there I was, traded like an asset in a multi-million-dollar deal. On one 20-hour day in May of 2020, I moved Apex Tech out of the hotel, clocked out for the last time, and immediately clocked in with my new position as the lead AV specialist for Zenith Systems and moved all their equipment in. Considerably less and cheaper equipment. The transition started out rocky, to say the least. The clients trusted me, and the hotel trusted me, but I could tell my new company still saw me as a member of a rival AV company, an extra person that they were required to hire. The contradictions started almost immediately. I had been running the storage rooms for 5 years, and so I knew where to store the equipment in the most efficient manner possible, but they made sure to correct me and make sure we moved the equipment in the way they wanted it. Over the next 2 months, they quickly learned that I was correct and the equipment made its way into the proper spots. The AV office also went through some changes as it became off limits for us specialists. It was to be an office for the director, the event coordinator, and for clients. There was to be no reason for us specialists to have to cross paths with the clients. In the 5 years with Apex Tech and my years at Zenith Systems, never had a client actually set foot in the AV office. We always came to them, they never came to us, so all this new policy did was take away my desk and anywhere else for my specialists to sit in our downtime between events. Those were just changes that screwed with us specialists. Over the next year, the changes this new AV company made started to affect the clients. A pattern started to emerge which the clients began to pick up on. Clients who had the same event at the hotel year after year for decades suddenly noticed a steep rise in the cost of everything. And then when the clients arrive and take a look at the ballroom, it's nowhere near as fancy as in previous years. In short, we were overcharging and under-delivering. I would try to slip our clients some of the equipment I knew they needed, but the new event coordinator put a stop to it whenever he caught me. If they didn't pay for it, they didn't get it. A whole year of this occurred with clients getting bare bones for what they paid for. My reputation held for a little bit, but clients soon realized my hands were tied and I wasn't allowed to give them the exceptional level of service they expected from me. Sales started to slow down and events started to use outside AV companies more often. After a year of this steady decline, there was a shakeup in the hotel. The AV director took this decline as a sign that it was time for him to retire, and the event coordinator moved on to another position. When they left, a new director transferred in from another hotel. He's taking on both positions as both the director and event coordinator. The previous duo may have been bad at the job, but this new guy made them look good by comparison. How do you fix charging too much? By charging even more. How do you talk to your clients? You talk down to them and make sure they know that you know more than they do. I literally had to take an active role in pushing him out of events when he would start to openly argue with event planners. I may not have had official authority over him, but at points when he took things too far with clients, I was not above treating him like a child and banishing him to his office. Over the years, I built up my reputation in the city as the AV specialist that everyone wanted to work with, and this guy could undo all my hard work and destroy my reputation in a single interaction. One particularly tense moment occurred during a high-profile corporate event. The new director, let's call him Marco, was in a heated discussion with the event planner Sarah. Marco: "Look, I've been in this business for years. I know what I'm talking about." Sarah: "But this isn't what we agreed upon in our contract. We're paying for premium service, and this setup is barely adequate." Marco: "Well, if you wanted more, you should have specified it. We're not mind readers." I could see Sarah's face turning red with frustration. I stepped in before things could escalate further. Me: "Marco, why don't you head back to the office? I'll take care of this." Marco: "But I'm the director. I should be handling this." Me: "Trust me. It's for the best. I've got this." Reluctantly, Marco left, and I turned to Sarah with an apologetic smile. Me: "I'm so sorry about that, Sarah. Let me see what I can do to improve the setup." Sarah: "Thank you. I knew I could count on you." When this new director took over, the writing was on the wall. Zenith Systems was a sinking ship, and the captain of the flagship hotel was drunk with power and actively aiming for the iceberg. I was still friends with many of the executives at GHG, so I still had a sentimental connection to try to stick with the hotel and rescue it from the downward spiral. I had to figure out a way to retain the clients, but that's very difficult to do with the way the new director was crippling our reputation. Zenith Systems was corrupt all the way to the top, with policies that valued money and power over giving our clients what they need for their events. At our lowest point, we had staple events that were held consistently at our hotel for decades, suddenly switching to other hotels. Do you have any idea how much attention it attracts in a billion-dollar corporation when your AV company is responsible for losing the hotel millions of dollars in events? The decline was getting bad, and the final straw came when the decline affected the hours. We 4 specialists were lucky to get 10 hours of work a week. Clients at the hotel just weren't going with us anymore, and so there were not enough hours to go around. An AV specialist doesn't work at a normal set time. They work only when there's an event to work, so if there is no work, then there are no hours. If there are no hours, then there is no pay. And as an AV specialist, you need to be ready to go whenever an event was scheduled, so having a supplementary part-time job to fill in the gaps was impossible. We had it. I started to orchestrate a little operation in our massive amount of free time. We all started looking for new jobs, and by us all, I don't just mean the 4 specialists at Pinnacle Hotel. A similar decline was happening at all the other Zenith Systems hotels in our area, and so I convinced every specialist in the area to start job searching if they weren't already doing so. As luck would have it, our job searches were all receiving some very promising results at roughly the same time, so a synchronized event was possible. Now, nothing can be proven I had anything to do with it, but a friend of mine at Apex Tech, my old director who is now promoted into an executive position, may or may not have been given a sufficient heads up on what was about to happen. A hint or two may have also made its way somehow to a couple of friends I still had at GHG. GHG was really getting pissed off at Zenith Systems, but they were locked into the same 5-year contract and had no choice but to endure the decline until the contract was up, unless something significant happened to break that contract. Suddenly, within the same week, every AV specialist in the region put in their 2-week notice at the same time. This happened, seemingly coordinated right before a large event at Pinnacle Hotel for GHG. As I said before, Pinnacle Hotel was the flagship hotel where GHG held all their corporate events, and now the only one left to set up and run their largest event was the lone, incompetent Zenith Systems director. This problem created a massive ripple effect through Zenith Systems. The biggest yearly event for their biggest client at the flagship hotel was in jeopardy, and they did not have the manpower to deliver what they promised. They were in breach of the contract. But lucky, Apex Tech somehow heard about all these problems coming up and was able to swoop in and provide the most impressive AV setup GHG ever had at their event. This series of events really impacted Zenith Systems' worth as a company, and Apex Tech was glad to step in and make Zenith Systems an offer. Apex Tech ended up absorbing Zenith Systems. All equipment and personnel became part of Apex Tech. Apex Tech also absorbed the existing contract, which GHG was happy to allow them to do. Apex Tech moved back into every GHG hotel nationwide. Events returned to the hotel upon hearing this news, and the reputation was restored. My plan went exactly as well as I hoped it would. The mass quitting I organized was the final nail in the coffin to take down a multi-million-dollar AV company. Apex Tech was able to expand back to the size they were before and is still at all of GHG's hotels to this day. GHG was hemorrhaging money due to Zenith Systems, and they were quite relieved to be rid of them. Unfortunately, the story never really had a happy ending for me. As I mentioned, I held on to the position for far too long. I should have gotten out 2 years earlier than I did, and in those 2 years of minimal hours for minimal pay, I ended up in a financial black hole that I just finished digging myself out of last year. My car was repossessed, my condo was foreclosed, and my business was forced to close its doors as I had to sell all my equipment just to get by. From that point on, I was forced to give up on following my dreams, and instead follow the money instead. To get positions that paid big rather than positions that allowed me to do the kind of work I love to do. Zenith Systems took everything from me, but I can proudly say that I was the one specialist responsible for taking out an entire company. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd end up in a legal battle with a multi-million-dollar company, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. It all started when I inherited my grandfather's old farmhouse on the outskirts of town. The place had seen better days, but it sat on a decent chunk of land, about 50 acres of fields and woods. I was in my late 20s, working a dead-end job in the city, so the idea of fixing up the old place and maybe starting a small farm seemed like a dream come true. I quit my job, cashed out my savings, and dove headfirst into my new rural life. For the first few months, everything was great. I was learning the ropes of basic home repair, planting a vegetable garden, and even thinking about getting some chickens. My nearest neighbor was old Mr. Johnson, a friendly guy who'd been friends with my grandpa. He was always happy to lend a hand or share some farming wisdom. One sunny Tuesday morning in May, I was out checking my fences when I noticed something odd. There was a group of people walking around the far end of my property, near where it bordered the main road. They had clipboards and were taking measurements. Curious and a bit concerned, I headed over to see what was going on. As I got closer, I could see that they were wearing matching polo shirts with a company logo, Greenfield Developments. A woman who seemed to be in charge noticed me approaching and walked over with a big fake smile plastered on her face. "Good morning," she chirped. "You must be a local. I'm Karen Williams, CEO of Greenfield Developments. We're just doing some preliminary surveying for our new project. Exciting times ahead for your little town." I frowned, confused. "Preliminary surveying? On my land? I think there must be some mistake. This is private property." Karen's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "Oh, I think you're mistaken. This land was recently acquired by Greenfield Developments. We're planning to build a new shopping center here. It's going to bring jobs and economic growth to the area. You should be thrilled." My heart started racing. This couldn't be right. "No, that's impossible. I inherited this land from my grandfather. I have the deed and everything. You must have the wrong location." Karen's smile finally slipped, replaced by a look of annoyance. "Listen, young man. I don't know what you think you know, but I assure you, Greenfield Developments has legally purchased this land. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do." She turned her back on me and started walking away. I stood there, stunned for a moment before finding my voice again. "Hey, you can't just ignore me. This is my property, and you're trespassing. I'm going to call the police if you don't leave right now." Karen spun around, her face flushed with anger. "Go ahead, call them. We have all the necessary paperwork. You're the one who's going to end up in trouble for interfering with a legitimate business operation." My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and dialed cop. While I waited for the police to arrive, Karen and her team continued their work, completely ignoring me. I felt helpless and angry, watching these strangers traipse all over my land as if they owned the place. When the police finally showed up, I explained the situation. Karen confidently presented her paperwork to the officers, who looked it over with furrowed brows. One of them turned to me. "Sir, do you have your deed with you?" I ran back to the house to grab it, my mind racing. How could there be two sets of legal documents for the same piece of land? When I returned with my paperwork, the officers compared the two. After a tense few minutes, one of the officers spoke up. "Ma'am, there seems to be a discrepancy here. The land described in your documents is actually the property next door, not this one. You're currently trespassing on private property." Karen's face went from smug to shocked in an instant. "That's impossible. Our lawyers assured us everything was in order. This has to be a mistake." The officer shook his head. "I'm afraid not. I'm going to have to ask you and your team to leave immediately. If you have concerns about your land purchase, you'll need to take that up with your lawyers and the seller." As Karen and her team packed up their equipment, shooting dirty looks my way, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But that relief was short-lived as I realized this probably wasn't the end of the matter. Sure enough, the next day I received a cease and desist letter from Greenfield Development's lawyers claiming that I was interfering with their business operations and demanding that I allow them access to their property. It was clear that Karen wasn't going to give up without a fight. Feeling overwhelmed, I reached out to Mr. Johnson for advice. He listened to my story and shook his head grimly. "Sounds like you've got a real problem on your hands, son. But I think I know someone who can help. My nephew's a lawyer in the city, specializes in property law. Want me to give him a call?" I gratefully accepted his offer, and the next day I found myself sitting in the office of James Johnson, Esquire. James was younger than I expected, probably in his mid-30s, with a friendly face and a no-nonsense attitude. After hearing my story, James leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Well, the good news is that you're clearly in the right here. The bad news is that companies like Greenfield Developments often try to bully smaller landowners into submission. They're counting on you not having the resources or the will to fight back." I felt my heart sink. "So what can I do?" James smiled, a glint of determination in his eye. "We fight back harder. First things first, we're going to file a countersuit for trespassing and harassment. Then we'll dig into how they ended up with the wrong property documents. Something smells fishy there. Over the next few weeks, James and I worked tirelessly to build our case. We discovered that Greenfield Developments had a history of shady land deals, often taking advantage of elderly or uninformed property owners. In this case, they had somehow obtained documents for my land, despite purchasing the neighboring property. As we dug deeper, we uncovered a web of deceit involving a corrupt county clerk who had been altering property records for a cut of Greenfield's profits. It was a huge scandal that quickly made local headlines. Meanwhile, Karen and her company continued to harass me. They sent more threatening letters, and I often spotted their vehicles driving slowly past my property. But with James's help, I stood my ground. Finally, after months of legal back and forth, we had our day in court. I was a nervous wreck as I took the stand, but James had prepared me well. I told my story clearly and confidently, presenting all the evidence we had gathered. Karen's testimony, on the other hand, was a disaster. Under James's skillful cross-examination, she became flustered and contradicted herself several times. The final nail in the coffin was when James presented evidence of Karen's involvement in the county clerk scandal. The judge's ruling was swift and decisive. Not only did he affirm my ownership of the land, but he also ordered Greenfield Developments to pay substantial damages for their harassment and illegal actions. Karen's face was a mixture of rage and disbelief as the verdict was read. As we left the courthouse, reporters swarmed around us. James handled most of the questions, but one reporter asked me how it felt to take on a big corporation and win. I thought for a moment before answering. It feels like justice. This land has been in my family for generations, and I wasn't about to let anyone steal it through tricks and bullying. I just hope this serves as a warning to other companies who think they can take advantage of ordinary people. In the weeks that followed, the fallout from the case was significant. Greenfield Development's reputation was in tatters, and they faced multiple investigations into their business practices. Karen resigned in disgrace, and last I heard, she was facing criminal charges related to the property record fraud. As for me, life gradually returned to normal. With the lawsuit behind me and some extra money from the damages, I was able to really invest in the farm. I planted an orchard, built a proper chicken coop, and even restored my grandfather's old barn. Mr. Johnson became a regular visitor, always happy to share a cold beer and swap stories on my porch. One evening, as we watched the sun set over my fields, he chuckled and said, "You know, your grandpa would be real proud of you. Not just for saving the farm, but for standing up to those city slickers who thought they could push you around." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. It hadn't been an easy fight, but it was worth it. This land was more than just property to me now. It was a symbol of perseverance, of standing up for what's right, and of honoring my family's legacy. As the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, I raised my beer bottle in a silent toast. To Grandpa, to justice, and to the power of standing your ground, no matter how big the bully. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.